Here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Process. I'm here with my co-host, Marco Antonio Alvarez, and he has a special guest today I tried my best to do that accent of yours, but I messed it up. He has a special guest who's been his friend for a while in the space, and he's very introspective on certain topics. And so I'm going to let Marco kind of introduce the topic today.
Thank you very much, Wesley. Appreciate that. And it was a pretty good Spanish accent that you brought in there. We'll have to practice that some more. Yes, folks, we have a special guest today, a good friend of mine from the space, Mr. James Zhang. Did I say your last name right?
You got it, Zhang.
Got it. Right
Good
on.
job.
Right. Excellent. So James has been doing something really cool for the past, 5 months, 6 months now?
5, 6 months. Yep.
5, 6 months now. Okay, cool. If you guys aren't following him on YouTube, please do. I've shared a few of his videos already on my page just to get the word out because I find it valuable. So as many of you know by now, who's been supporting the process for a while, we get philosophical, we get psychological, we delve into personal development and all these things. And James has been doing that with his channel. And I think it's very refreshing to see that, especially from younger homies for sure. Right. Again, I've mentioned it in the show why, I like hanging with Wesley and doing this. And the same reason why I'm inviting, James over to the show. And so with that being said, I'm going to open up things with a quote that Alan Watts, when he was alive, he'd like to refer to. And this comes from Chuang Tzu, a Chinese philosopher. And the quote goes like this: "The perfect man employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing. It refuses nothing. It receives, but does not keep." So some of you at home are probably going like, what the fuck did he just say? All right. And so we're about to dissect this individually and give our own opinion on that, because I sent it earlier to the guys here to just sit and ponder it. And I want to just open it up right now with what I see that quote as, and that is one of acceptance. And so, as many of you know, what we try to do here on the show is to give you guys something of practicality that you can apply to your life, that you can apply to your sales game, to your entrepreneurial endeavors, whatever it might be. And so this concept of acceptance, of being able to receive and not hang on to it, is something that has served me well. But as we've readily admitted on the show, like, I have issues, man. We all do. And so it's one of those things. It's about the work to constantly have these things in the forefront, so I can have a more pleasant experience on this mortal realm, essentially. Right. And when I'm talking about acceptance and what that quote is what says to me, it's about being able to receive events and things and stimuli and data and let it go as quickly as I can. So I can be extremely mindful. And I'm also having to be mindful about my processes as well. Right. So we talked about in the past in the show about presence and the importance of that. And so think about how that can apply to you in real life. Think about how that can apply to you, like on a sales call, for example. The other person says something that you didn't expect them to say, or the call's not going your way. And all of a sudden now you're getting flustered and all this other shit. And then your energy starts spiraling out of control. And then the rest of your day's fucked off. Why? Because you couldn't accept what happened. You wanted things to be a certain way. And I've been guilty of that to this day, this morning, last night. This is why, pun intended, that's why it's part of the process. Right? That's why this show is called The Process, because it's part of the process. So with that being said, gentlemen, whoever wants to chime in first with your 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, however much money you brought. So please open up the floor.
After
I
you.
like that. Yeah, I like that, Marco. I guess when I thought about this quote, I was thinking more in terms of just kind of like the way that our minds work, because something that I've really started to grasp and understand is that, you know, everything that we see, every relationship that we have, every friendship that we have is always going to be a reflection of ourselves, right? So in that way, our mind is always a mirror, because, you know, everything that we experience in the outside world is going to be a reflection, right? It's what, you know, gets projected back on you, depending on, you know, the way that you feel about yourself, right? The way that you feel about the world. And, you know, connecting that with acceptance, right? Accepting sort of like, I guess, like what you get, like what you receive, and sort of understanding that like that is sort of the reality that you create, right? And if you don't like that reality, it's sort of up to you to be able to change it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like what you said about the your friends are a reflection of you, because when you said that, I instantly thought about like each stage of my life and having like different types of friends that I either grew out of or they grew out of me, and then I had to figure out why and reassess. Um, I actually recently hung out with a friend group of mine that was like, you know, some friends from childhood, and I thought it would be this nostalgic thing, and it was like this weird disconnect. Like we took different paths, and taking it back to the acceptance thing, I think. Well, I want to posit this to you, James, because you had an episode about growing out of friends or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was talking about.
Yeah. Outgrowing
Um,
friends.
yeah. So like, do you feel like you keep friends that are, because Marco and I talk a lot about like becoming your optimal self, and you have certain friends in your life at different periods where maybe you look back and you're like, wow, I definitely would not hang out with that person now, or maybe like, man, I wish I had held on to that friend, right? Do you feel like the people in your life, the relationships you have, and the way that they play out is a reflection of maybe the ratio that you accept yourself, or I don't know how to say that, but like the level that you accept yourself dictates the dynamics that you have with different people. Does that make sense?
100%. It does, yeah. And I just want to add on to that too. So the level that you accept yourself is obviously going to be reflected in your friends, and the level of, I guess I'm saying the same thing, but I guess like the level of like what you accept for yourself as well, right? Because like if you love yourself, like if you truly love yourself, then there are going to be people, and there are going to be things that might happen to you that you're just unwilling to accept, because you know it's not going to be good for you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Here's something interesting to bring up. It's mentioned. It's been mentioned, and this is in relation to friendship and friends. Um, I think I'm older than you guys. I think, and
Maybe
maybe I'm not sure what the giveaway
the
is.
gray hairs might be
I, I'm not.
a
I'm not. I'm
indicator
not.
there.
I'm not sure what the giveaway is. Right. Anyways, so this is what I'm driving at. You are gonna go outgrow friends, 100%. All right. Now I've been friends with people from as far as junior high, still to this day. Are we close friends? Do we actively hang out? No, but we still check in. We're still cordial. We still, see each other on Facebook. Granted, now I live far away from these guys, but our lives have diverged and they're very different. Some friends have gone down some very interesting rabbit holes and not so good places, and they have come out of it, right? And that thing is that's it's like a constantly shifting thing, right? And so as you guys have as noticed, as like as you're developing, you start outgrowing all kinds of things. You start like you outgrow clothes, you start outgrowing your toys. You even start, what I've noticed also is you start outgrowing musical tastes as well, right?
Mhm.
And so I think we're constantly outgrowing former versions of ourselves and everything that comes with that. And I would even say that you even outgrow certain identities that you have, because that's a big part of it, right? We attach to that identity and what it is in relation to that person. And then some of them, as much as you try, good luck outgrowing it. And what I'm referring to is like your parents. Doesn't matter, at least so far I've noticed, doesn't matter how much older I get, my mom is still going to see me in a certain way and talk to me in a certain way. And so then going back to acceptance, I can't change her. And that's going to be the same with every other family member, things like that. I can only accept how they view me and also be very mindful of my own internal processes and how I respond to them, as opposed to, damn it, I'm a 47-year-old man, mom, quit treating me like I'm 12. And then she goes, just as I thought. Can you guys relate to that? Has that happened?
100%. Yeah. Um, that's something that I had to learn sort of on my own sort of transformation journey is like, because I've sort of outpaced the growth of a lot of my friends and most of my family. There's a part of me that wants to change them. And there's a part of me that wants to help them grow, to, I guess, like help them become like the best versions of themselves. And one of the lessons, one of the most important lessons I've learned early on is accepting the fact that sometimes people don't want to change, right? They definitely don't want to change because you want them to change, and they definitely don't want them to change in the time frame that you want them to change it. So that's something I had to learn, is to accept them really as they are, right? If they change, amazing. If they stay the same, that's life, right? That's for the choice that they made for themselves.
Yeah. And I'm going to posit something to you. I like to play devil's advocate when we all agree on everything, just to throw us a wrench in the whole thing. Do you feel like there's an inverse way of looking at that, where it's like, instead of outgrowing people, maybe the relationship style that you have changes with that person? For example, like, you might have looked up to a friend at one point because he made you feel like you fit in and he was part of a clique. Like, I remember I had this one friend, and he always got me into trouble, and we always, we're getting into bad stuff, but like, I love this guy. He was like one of my best friend for like 2 years, and I felt like we had, a good friendship. And um eventually, I outgrew him, and I guess you would say, but in a way, I look back and he still messages me, and I see that he's in this kind of like weird mental ditch, so to speak, in a weird way. So it's like, maybe my relationship with this guy changed from looking up to him to maybe helping encourage him or inspire him or something like that. Maybe you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Because I always tell Marco, like, um, if you're aware of something, it's your like moral obligation in a sense to fix it. Like, if you're aware of the problem and you can consciously see it and no one else can, it's almost like your moral obligation to fix it, because otherwise, how else is it going to get fixed? So what do you think of that side of the
I mean,
coin?
yeah, I would agree to a certain extent, right? Especially if this is a friend that you were close to. Right? Obviously, as a good friend, you'd want to help them, right? You'd want to kind of point out, where maybe they're falling behind. But I guess again, it goes back to, there's only so much that you can do for them, right? Because you can give them the best advice in the world, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to actually take it and implement it, right? Otherwise, if you give them all this advice and they do nothing, then you know the friendship is strained, because number one, you get frustrated, and number two, it's like nothing changes still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you go? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna tie that off with a bow, because I think the reason why it seems like it's almost like a detour talking about relationships and acceptance, but I like how you add it's kind of a reflection of you and your internal state a little bit, because I have a huge problem with acceptance. Like, I deal with depression and all sorts of crazy stuff that Marcos can attest to. And one of the hardest things for me to do, especially in my sales journey, is to like accept myself. And then that reflects on my prospects. I get angry at people or whatever. And you've talked about emotional maturity on some of your YouTube videos. Um, so it's really hard because I deal with this acceptance problem, but I found a frame that somewhat works for now. It might not be an optimal frame, but it's a frame of selflessness. Like, if I just kill my ego and don't even like have myself in the equation. And that's probably why it's not optimal, because where's me? But if I remove myself and just focus on love, trying to love someone selflessly the way Jesus did, and I'm not Christian, but he's a good frame for selflessness, then it allows me to like to do things for the fact that like, hey, if I were to not exist anymore, that might benefit me, but my siblings would be in pain for the rest of their life or whatever. So everything becomes an act of love toward other people. Do you feel like there's a part of that with acceptance where it's like it's almost like getting rid of yourself and focusing more on selflessness, or do you feel like that's kind of like a not really the same thing, would you say?
I've got some thoughts on this, but Marco, you look like you want to share something.
No,
So
no, please,
go ahead.
please, please, you go for it.
Okay. It goes back to the way I like to think about Wesley. It goes back to the quote that Marco read where it first started. And in order to like truly like love somebody, you first have to love yourself, right? That relationship with yourself has to be the first. And I think there is a time and a place to selflessly love somebody, but in order for that to happen, the prerequisite really has to be the internal love that you give to yourself, right? Because if you don't understand and you don't really know how to love yourself, then where do you base the love off of, loving someone else, right? Because everyone, again, is going to be a reflection of you and of the relationship that you have with yourself. And I know in philosophy, there's this big thing about kind of like getting rid of the ego. But I think there is a place for a healthy ego to emerge, right? Carl Jung talks a lot about this, where it's not so much about getting rid of the ego, but it's more about developing a healthy and strong enough ego so that you can have your place in the world, right? So that you can share your message and give love and benefit humanity, right? And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. I want to chime in real quick on that, and this is a thing that pops up, this concept of killing the ego, which I think it's impossible unless you get high as fuck on ketamine, you do some really crazy psychedelics, or you're dead. And the reason why I bring it up is you literally, by being conscious and having experiences and memories and attaching to things, which we do uh normally, that's going to be the ego that is just going to be with you constantly, right? Now you can develop a conscious awareness to where you can step behind this identity of Marco, James, and Wesley, right? And I think that's what Carl Jung was driving at, is you can still develop this healthy sense, this healthy sense of ego, as long as you have this cultivated awareness around that. And part of that cultivated awareness, that healthy awareness, comes with acceptance, comes with presence, comes with developing self-care and self-love. And so, and also too, I think taking expectation out of the equation as much as you can. Because when we start having expectations on reality, then we start creating disappointments and all these wants, needs, and desires, and it starts becoming this thing that starts spiraling out of control. And so that translates to every single relationship that we have in life, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with a loved one, family, friends, the other human on the other end of a Zoom when you're having a sales call, right? Same thing. If we're coming into it, expecting this guy, right? What do they say? Be detached to the sale, be detached to the outcome, for sure. And those are really cool words to recite. But like anything, they're just fucking words until you start putting the actual actions into play. And what are those actions again? Awareness, acceptance, presence. And something else that I totally forgot about. So there we go. See, all
Yeah, no,
early
I was
on
gonna,
stage Alzheimer's, man.
yeah, that's evidence that you're older than us, I guess. Um, so yeah, I was gonna add that because yeah, I've struggled with the self-love thing, and I guess it depends on how you define acceptance, right? Like accepting your lot in life is a lot different than accepting yourself. Accepting yourself, and then it's like, okay, in order to do that, you have to find place where you love yourself. And so I've used the psychological for anyone that deals with this, of just like finding a screenshot of my life where I did love myself. Like, was there any point in history where I, did love and accept myself? And there's a clear image of that for me, like when I was like a 11, 12-year-old kid and thought very highly of myself and stuff. So it's easy to tap into that, because I don't know if Alan Watts said this or one of the philosophers, but like, or psychologists, a lot of our personality is kind of just like over time, just putting on masks and seeing what fits and what people kind of cooperate with in society. And then you kind of just hold that frame as like, this is who I am. But who we are changes. Like we just said, like we outgrow friends, which means we're evolving. So there's an evolution of your identity in a sense, right? And maybe there's a version of your identity that you could really vibe with, and right now you can't wrestle with it for now, but maybe someday you will. So yeah, I guess that's a good point to kind of delve into a little bit more. It's like what type of acceptance are we talking about? Are we talking about an acceptance of ourselves? Are we talking about an acceptance of external things around us that we can't control, which is more of a stoic type of acceptance? Are they the same? How do they mesh together? That kind of thing.
That's a really great question. And I think those two are very distinct. I want to dive deeper into the self-acceptance portion, because I think acceptance exists on a spectrum. It's not just I don't accept myself and I fully accept myself, right? It's this spectrum. It's this sort of like, how much, to what degree do you accept yourself? What are the parts that you do accept about yourself, and what are the parts that you don't accept about yourself? And this goes deeper into sort of the notion that our consciousness, our psyche is made up of these different aspects of ourselves, right? Internal family systems, it's a form of kind of like identifying different parts of ourselves. And like, yes, I think we all have parts of ourselves that we do accept, right? And we all have parts of ourselves that we repress, that we feel for whatever reason, based off of our upbringing, based off of trauma, that we cannot accept. And that's where the conflict comes in, because, in order to be a fully integrated human, you need to figure out how to start to accept those parts that you've repressed, right? Jung talks a lot about this when it comes to the shadow, right? The aspects of ourselves that we push away, we project onto other people, right? Because it's unacceptable for us to hold that tension within ourselves. So we put that onto other people. And that's the work, really, is to, take back those parts, love them, and become fully human.
Mm-hmm. So let me check in with you, man. So what was the impetus for you to start your series?
That's a really good question. Yeah. Growing up, I've always wondered, like, who I was, like who I truly was, because I've always felt like I didn't really fit in with people. I didn't really fit in with my school friends, and I just knew there were parts of myself that were missing. And I've always been very, very curious as to like who I truly was authentically. And after going through quite a bit of journeying through plant medicine, therapy, a whole bunch of different modalities, I started to realize just how little of myself I actually knew existed. And it really wasn't until, I would say, these past 2 years, really like the last year, where I started to realize, like, holy shit, I'm more than just, the James Zhang that I present on sales calls, right? The James Zhang I present in my relationships to my friends, right? There's a lot more going on beneath the surface. And I wanted to sort of capture that journey, right, as to what I've learned, and share it with the world, and hope that people start to see that who they are is constantly changing, but also is so much more than what they think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, this collapses back into what we're talking about today. Acceptance. Right. And the way, the other way to see this, right? This is something that I've been getting into recently, And this is even a more fundamental and even more elementary aspect to all of this work. We're going to get a little weird right now, guys. You ready?
Let's
You guys
go.
ready? You guys ready?
I love
So what
weird.
type of weird you're talking about?
You'll see. You'll see.
But yeah.
I'm not going to
Okay.
get like naked or anything like that and start whacking it. Not that kind of weird. Let me just check in with the audience at home. Are you guys ready? All right. All right. Let's get
We're
ready.
ready.
So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michael Singer. I'm not sure if I mentioned him already. I've been getting into his work lately, right? And dude, he breaks it down so easily, right? And it's about energy blockages. Now you're probably going like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? What do you mean energy blockages, old man? And what I mean by that is this, is that, all right, so what's the God, I got to look up the word again. It starts with a P, but I'm just going to call it trope right now. But what's the real common trope that you hear in the personal development space when they talk about emotions? They say emotions, it's energy in motion.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
it's true. It's true. All right, right. It's true. It is right. And when do you start feeling emotions in your body? Right, you start feeling it in your body, and what happens is that now I feel this thing, and I attach a narrative, and it becomes this feeling. Now I got this story attached to it. All right, because I don't want to feel it. I don't want to accept what's going on. I want to fight it. So I add resistance, and then that resistance can look like repression, can look like projection. And so the thing to do is when you're feeling the thing, is in that moment to accept it and let it go. And that is some high level work. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it can be. And that's been the work that I've been engaging in recently, because I have major issues when it comes to accepting certain aspects of my life and reality. And I resist quite a bit. And what does that resistance do? It causes me a lot of fucking suffering and misery internally, which is why I'm a huge fan of my routines, right? Of what I do in the morning so I can ground out, get my fucking sweat on, move it, and then feel better about things. And that's what I find that's what helps. But then also going back to what we were talking about with self-love and having that self-compassion. We got to love ourselves first and foremost. We got to take care of ourselves first and foremost. And I brought up this Ram Dass quote many times, and I'll bring it up again because I think it's one of the greatest quotes ever. There's nothing I can do for you except work on myself, and there's nothing you can do for me except work on yourself. The first time I heard that, I was like, what? And then the first time I said that to my partner, the mother of my son, in a fight, she told me to go fuck myself. And then a day later, she came back and said, you're right. Wow. Okay.
It's powerful.
It is. The floor is open, gentlemen.
Wes, you want to jump in? I've got some thoughts on this.
No, I'll let you go. I'm still trying to figure out where I want to take that. What he just presented there.
Mark, it's really interesting that you're getting to this stuff because I'm also getting to this stuff. I think it's no coincidence that we're talking on this show right now. One thing that I've learned is that our bodies are actually an extension of our mind, right? Specifically our unconscious mind, because that's where all the trapped emotions, that's where all of the trapped traumas, unprocessed traumas that we all have from childhood, from traumatic events lives, right? And as you said, energy is literally just energy in motion. When that energy gets trapped in your body, that shows up as patterns, right? That shows up as self-sabotage, as repeated things that you ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Right? Or like, why do I feel this way? Why do I have this just underlying baseline of anxiety or sadness, anger, rage, depression, right? And you mentioned in order to let that go, you need to accept it, and you need to, or you accept it and then you're able to let it go. I'm going to add in a step in the middle over there is you accept it, you feel it, right? You fully feel what's there, and then you're able to let it go, right? Because without feeling it, without going through the eye of the storm and feeling that whatever it is that you're holding on into your body, you can't let it go.
Yeah.
Right. Without understanding, without like physically feeling that sensation.
Yeah. That's why they say
You
a
gotta
saint's
face your dragon.
yes, yes. That's why they
Yeah.
say a saint's anger is like writing on water.
Saints
A
anger
saint,
is
a
like
saint,
writing.
a saint, right? A saint, like a holy person.
Okay.
A saint's
Yeah.
anger is like writing on water.
That's a new one.
Shall I? This is
It's
I borrowed it from
Impossible
Sing.
to do,
But
or something. I
do you want me to? Want me to break it down real
elaborate
quick?
on that because I'm
Yeah,
like
let me break it
stupid
break it
down real
down,
curious.
quick.
break it down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me
yeah.
break it down. All right. Water. When you mess with water, how quickly does it go back to equilibrium?
Very quickly.
Right? Look,
Very quick.
right? I can shake this and then eventually it's going to go back. Right? Okay.
Mhm.
How many times? Well, I don't know how many times you guys have, but you read Zen stories of masters who get angry and like, and then they're back at it. What normally happens for us regular folk is that we get angry, we hang on to it, we're fucking right. I didn't close that guy. Oh, the guy didn't want. That dude cut me off. I'm constipated. So that's the thing, right? The quickly we're able
Yeah.
to essentially alchemize, metabolize, process. That's the trick in this whole game.
That's the work, right? That's the work that like everybody needs to do, but most people don't know how. And for the ones that do know or get the sense they know how, it's still very difficult to do, right? Because usually those emotions, usually those trapped energies you have in your body are very painful. They're very, very painful. Right? They come from a lot of suffering. And to confront that and to open those doors and face those demons and face those dragons, like you've got to have some balls to do that.
Yeah.
Or ovaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gonads.
Marco and I were not arguing, I guess, philosophically about the framing of demons and stuff on our one of our last podcasts because he's like, well, you could see it not like that. And I was like, well, if you have a scar, like, and you got to touch the scar, it's gonna fucking hurt. Like eventually it'll heal and you can reframe how you look at it. But in the time being, like for the people that deal with demons, as you just said, like it's a demon until you kind of wrestle with it and turn it into an angel or some shit. You know, I don't know how that alchemy works, but um so I think basically what you're talking about is like coping mechanisms, right? Like you have these traumas and then you develop coping mechanisms that are what you said, patterns that we kind of play out. So the question is like, I know that there's this, you laid out a process. I don't remember the sequence you said. Can you give me the sequence again? It was like acceptance, something like that.
Yeah. Before you accept it, you have to recognize it first, right? Because you can't
Recognize it.
accept what you don't know. So recognizing is
Okay.
the first step, is to develop the awareness around what's actually going on. And super simple to do, but most people don't have the awareness to do it. It's just recognize what triggers you. Like recognize what makes you upset or when you start to get like very overwhelmed with any kind of emotion. But typically it's going to be like fear, anxiety, sadness, right? Grief, rage, anger, all the emotions that are generally repressed in our modern society because they're deemed as like bad emotions or unacceptable. And then you start to identify like what actually triggered it, right? So the first step is awareness around what's actually going on. And then the second step would be to accept, you know, this is how I'm feeling, or this is how a part of me is feeling, right? Because we all have different parts. And then from there, it's, you know, just sitting with it, sitting with the full emotion. One thing I picked up that's been really, really helpful is like an emotion might start small. So if we like to personify, that's a really easy way to kind of understand it. It might be like small, right? It might feel or look small. In your awareness, you can bring it up, you can blow it up, right? You can make it really, really, really big. And that'll help you feel the full-fledged like strength of the emotion. And you just sit with that. It's gonna be really uncomfortable, but you do it. And then what happens is you're able to let it go.
So here's something that you
Yeah.
can do with all that. It's really simple. Start small. And what I mean by that is this. When you're driving in traffic or when you're driving and someone's in front of you going slow, what happens in here? That person's slow in front of you. This
You get
mother,
pissed off, you react.
that's the moment right there. That's the moment right there. That's the moment. Recognize that, because it's the awareness. Recognize what's going on in that moment. There's nothing you can do to change it, especially if you're stuck in, double yellow lines that are solids and you can't go around them, short of fucking bumping into them and being a psychopath, right? But, the majority of us are not going to do that. And so in that moment, as soon as it comes up, recognizing that, and it's the small ones. It's the small ones, and then you can start building up to the larger ones. But you take the protocol that James pointed out, right? And having that awareness where you're like, oh shit, I'm feeling this. Okay. Breathe. Breathe.
Yeah.
Going back to the breath. The simplest of shit. And how many times do I forget it? How many times have we all forgotten it? And this is why we always come back to center. Always, always, always. Right? Again, one last time. Favorite Zen story ever of all time. Young monk to the old monk. Master, how long shall we practice Zazen? And the master goes, till you die.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that because James said the first part of that is awareness. So it's kind of like in sales where you analyze a call and figure out, okay, what went wrong and it's basically attribution, like what actually attributed to this issue. You got to like properly diagnose it. So I think if I'm, for example, the angry thing, it's very much of an anti-stoic frame that people have in that situation, which we all fall privy to, right?
Mhm.
Which is like things out of my control dictate my happiness, right?
Oh.
Instead of like, there's a lot of people that, like my grandpa, I always bring him up because he seems to be dialed in terms of like
I love it when you
temperance
bring
and
up
all
your
that stuff.
grandpa. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like it's interesting because like the same exact situation could happen to two different people and they interpret it totally different ways. One
Yeah.
person enjoys it, it was the best movie ever. Someone hates it, it was the worst thing in their life. And it's the same exact situation. So it's like, is that evidence that it's everything's a belief? Like the reaction in the car is a belief that, again, like this guy is the cause of my problems and the reason why I'm angry and everything. And you have to change where it's not the guy. It like you know what I mean? And like
Mhm.
and beliefs take time because it's a habit. So you got to kind of rewire your 95% habitual patterns that are going on. But I don't know where I was going with that actually.
Well, it's okay. You were this
But
close to enlightenment, bro. This close.
that's but so like I think I was going somewhere with like because Jordan Peterson are you into Jordan Peterson, James? Do you listen to some of his
I like his
stuff or
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So he's really big on stories and changing the story, changing the narrative. And so I think that's the work that you're talking about is like identifying what the story is that's causing us to play out the script that's not optimal and then figuring out a
Mhm.
better story to put in there and like playing with it a little bit, like trying to put it on for size, like we talked earlier with our personalities, trying to try it on for size and to really accept it and believe it. And like you said on one of your YouTube videos that like emotions aren't bad, like to be angry isn't bad. It was just in that one
Yep.
deployment of anger, which was behind a car, it was just an unuseful means
Mhm.
to get rid of your anger artillery, like use it for something else, right? Or
Yep.
be angry at the fact that you haven't changed and allow yourself to think of it differently or something. I don't know, channel it differently. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you
No,
have anything to add to that.
I think you hit the hammer right on the nail on the hammer. I always get that wrong. Um, but it goes back to self-acceptance as well, because a part of accepting yourself is also accepting that you have all these emotions, right? You have the wider range of human emotions to express, and none of them are wrong, right? None of them are bad, none of them are negative, right? You could use it in an unhealthy way, right, as sort of a defense or coping mechanism, but there's nothing wrong with feeling sad or feeling depressed or feeling angry or feeling hateful or feeling rage, right? Even though we're taught when we're young that like these are unacceptable, right? That's how we push them aside, we repress them, we project them outwards. But once you learn how to accept that you're capable of feeling all these emotions, then that's another piece forward to accepting yourself fully.
Mhm. Well said. Gentlemen, we have gone over half an hour, by the way. Like, yeah, we can easily go another half hour, but we got to wrap this baby up. Um, So typically what we do when we end the show is just like a takeaway, but I think takeaway principle, but I think we've been covering that throughout the whole fucking episode at this point. So it's been a good one. Wesley, anything to add before we close the show up?
No, just an observation that I've been having amongst myself of just the fact that we're three individuals with totally different life experiences and perspectives. And we've also shared many different angles of this exact same topic. And it's interesting to think about. I've never met you, James. I think I've seen you around on the Facebook groups and stuff like that. But um, just a weird side note for people is like the value of the importance of having different perspectives and in changing that narrative, right? Like to be able to talk to James and like hear his take on acceptance, and he's obviously operating a different script than I am with certain things. So there's disagreements, there's agreements, but it's allowing me to try on different personalities or different beliefs, you know, for size and to chew on it. So I would encourage everybody to just, if you're dealing with something, find someone that you can model that after, like model, you know, how to the solution to that, and try to get into their psyche and understand how they digest that same issue that you have that you somehow can't digest, if that makes sense.
Well said. Well said. James, any last closing remarks before we wrap up the show?
Just that it's been a pleasure talking with you gentlemen on this topic. Like, honestly, feel like we could probably talk like for 4 hours straight on all this, but obviously we have a time constraint. So, I mean, if you guys are open to it, I'd love to come back and maybe touch, because I feel like we've opened so many different doors. We could each go down each of them, but you know, that's it.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, absolutely. This is definitely going to be one that I'm going to rewatch a couple of times because there's definitely all these subjects that we can, rabbit trail down. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been another episode of The Process where we get real, raw, and grounded. This has definitely been a good one. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to James for joining us as well, and also to my fellow co-host, Mr. Wesley Mosier. I have been Mr. Marco Antonio Alvarez, and I always will be until I die. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Have a good night, good morning, and good afternoon.